Hi, everybody. This is Coach Aaron Saft in the Running Is Life podcast. Today's episode is going to be a little hodgepodge, a little stream of consciousness, if you will. I was thinking about a few things that some of my athletes are going through and thought I'd kind of share, and you can see if this is yourself when I go through all this, because a lot of times we are so focused on a race that sometimes we overdo our training in certain aspects because we're worried about a certain part of the race. I'll use an example. Leadville. A lot of people get so focused on Hope Pass. They worry about Hope Pass. Yeah, it's the toughest part of the course. A lot of climbing, going to high altitude, heat of the day, so many factors there. But it is just a piece of the course. There's so much other parts of this course that if we just focus our attention on just that one climb, and we're training for one climb, we miss a ton of our training. Leadville is honestly, and this is what I share with my athletes, it's such a running course. We don't want to be doing a ton of climbing all the time because we want to make sure that we're as aerobically fit as possible for multiple reasons. If you're going to altitude, that's your best possible scenario, is to be as fit as possible to deal with the altitude. Now, obviously, if you can get there early and acclimatize, that's wonderful. That's huge. That should be, but that's not possible for everybody. So if you can't, having the highest fitness possible is the next best thing. So being as fit as possible and be able to run as much as you can in that race is essential. So that should be the focus. Whereas that climb is ancillary, and we can work that into the training, but it is not the primary focus of the training, right? A lot of people that train for Western States, they focus on downhill or heat training, right? And there are specific times when we want to put those into our training, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about. We don't want to do it all the time because it creates too much fatigue. It can create an injury. So we have to be careful with what we do and how we do it. So we're going to talk about that today. So first and foremost, recognize if you're putting too much emphasis or too much focus on one aspect of the race. I can think back to when I was training for Hard Rock, and I was so nervous for Handy's Peak, the 14er that's in Hard Rock. I was so nervous to go up and over that. And, in this regard, it wasn't necessarily my training that was the problem. It was my mental state. I was extremely nervous for Handies. I let it affect my sleep, my thoughts, my training, because I was just so nervous about this one climb, right? So our focus doesn't primarily have to be on a physical aspect, a piece of our training. It can be a mental aspect as well. So recognize that. Recognize what's bothering you and recognize it's part of the course and you're going to have to deal with it. And instead of making you nervous, think about what are you going to do? How are you going to tackle it? How are you going to get through it, right? Ask other people, especially those that maybe come from a similar area as you. How did they deal with it? How did it go for them? Is it as bad as you're making it out to be? So, but also be prepared for the answer, right? Yes, it is as bad as you imagine it to be. That may make you a little bit nervous, but again, it's something you're going to have to deal with and come to terms with. And when it gets there, when I got there, when I looked at the bottom and started going up and I could see the summit of Handies, I recognized it. I was like, all right, we're here. This is what I've been nervous about, but I can't turn back now. I got to get through it. So you have to recognize that it's something you have to get through. So even if you're nervous about it, you have to come to terms with it. In the past, I've talked about changing the vocabulary and changing your thought process around it because you're creating these neural pathways that are just setting you down the wrong path. So we have to reformulate that. And I recognize that now that I can't look at races in the same regard. I can't look at those aspects of a race that make me nervous. In Bigfoot, it was the distance, 209 miles, longest I had ever gone. And prior to that, I was, wondered if the body could do it, but instead of becoming nervous about the distance, I became excited for it. I anticipated and couldn't wait for the race to come because I just wanted to do it. I wanted to go out there and be a part of this event and see what 209 miles felt like. So I changed my thought process. I changed my vocabulary around it so that I was in a positive frame of mind, an excited frame of mind, which really helped me to get through the event because I was excited to be there rather than dreading this one part of the course or the distance itself, right? I changed my thought process. So that really helped me a lot. Okay. With my athletes, we've kind of been reviewing Addie Bracey's book. Again, I talk about it so much, but there is so much in this book that I think you should go through and work through, because another piece of this, and I told you this is going to be a stream of conscious, so stick with me. We get into this way about us that if, one of our whys, and we often talk about our whys, is we want to see what happens, when we get into that dark place. We want to see how tough we are. We want to see what our thought process is. What do we do? Well, when we get to that dark place, what happens if we don't like what we find? What happens if we don't like the thought process or who we become or what we're doing or how we react? What happens if what happens if we don't react positively, if we don't feel that we're strong enough or, we let ourselves down? That's a really big question. That's a hard question to face. And if it happens, that's even harder. So, what do we do? Well, I spoke with one of my athletes who may be listening to this, and I said, you have to learn to tune out your thoughts. And how do we do that? Well, it begins with meditation. I use meditation almost on a daily basis now. I've talked about in the past using Headspace. And so I'm going to put Headspace in the show notes because I think it is a great resource. Now, there are multiple apps out there, things that can help you learn how to meditate. And the process itself is about limiting thought. Okay. Not only limiting, but eliminating it, especially in a time where you don't need it, right? So being able to control yourself and control your thoughts will help you control your emotions. It spirals, right? So if you let your thoughts control you, if you all of a sudden become emotional and these thoughts turn on you, that's a really hard place to be. So instead, meditation teaches you to be present, right? To focus just on the breath. Focus on the controllable. You can breathe. That is the simplest thing we can do, is breathe. So focus on the breath, right? From there, once you have control of your breath and you now can have control of your thoughts, you can now take control of what you need to do at the moment. What can I do at the moment to keep moving forward? I can have a drink. I can eat something. I can take one more step, right? Focus on the simple things. Now, don't worry about the complexity or the big picture at the moment. Worry about the simple things that are right in front of you, right? And that starts by taking control of your thoughts, right? And it's as simple as paying attention to your breath. The simple exercise that's done every day in Headspace is just focusing on the breath. And how do you do that? You count to 10. You say 1 is an in breath, 2 is an out breath, 3 in breath, all the way to 10. And then when you get to 10, you go back to 1, start over again. If thoughts start coming in, you let go of those thoughts. Go blank. Be a blank page and focus on the breath again. Okay? Take control of yourself. Focus on the breath. Get back to your counting. If you don't remember where you're at, start back at 1. Okay? But it's a simple exercise. Simple exercise. But it teaches you how to control those thoughts, to push out any negative thoughts, and focus on the moment. Be present. That's the biggest thing. And that's the biggest thing that I can say that I did at Bigfoot was I stayed present. I stayed in the moment. I didn't worry about what mile I was in or how far I had to go. I just stayed present, stayed in the moment, enjoyed the moment, really enjoyed everything that was around me, the surroundings. When I picked up my pacers, I enjoyed being with my friends. Sure, I looked forward to seeing my crew and my family at the aid stations, but I stayed with the moment. I stayed present and recognized, what do I need right now so I can get there, so I can get to what I'm looking forward to, right? That's the biggest thing, is learning to stay present, and that's a big piece of meditation. So meditation has really helped me. Now, when I moved here to the Western North Carolina in 2007, I was a very different Aaron. I'll be honest. I was not into meditation. I don't even think I knew what meditation was, to be honest. I was not present. I hadn't even done an ultra to that point. 2008 was the first year I did an ultra. I was a marathoner. That things were very different. I've had to learn over the course of time to control myself and my thoughts, my actions, right? And that's really come a long way through practicing meditation. So I can't overstate the value of being able to meditate, to be practiced at just following the breath, right? So I know it sounds crazy. I probably would have told myself, the 2007 Aaron would have told the 2024 Aaron, you're nuts. Like, that stuff doesn't work. Like, why on earth would you waste your time? But as I've, really recognized that it does help to calm myself down, especially, if you're getting worked up, it's tough to remind yourself, all right, focus on the breath, relax, let's be present, let's be here, let's be now. Okay. So it's something you have to work on. It doesn't come quickly. It definitely takes work. It's hard to sit still. It's hard to sit still and just relax and focus on the breath, because we have so many thoughts that run through our heads, right? But in that time, your only sole job is to focus on you. And just like when you're racing, right? When you're racing, your sole focus should be on you, what you need and what you're doing, right? So make your thoughts, make your actions relevant to you and what's going on with you. Okay. Turn away those negative thoughts. Focus your energies on making sure you're making the right decisions to help you get through that event. That's huge. I know that was a huge sidebar, but I think that's, as much advice as I can give you there. There's so much that you can work on just within that little piece right there. Just with working on focusing on the breath and counting to 10 multiple times, it will reset you. Okay. So work on that. Use an app. Like I said, I use Headspace. I don't have any affiliation with them, but that's who I use. All right. So now, when do we really want to focus on our event, the aspects of our event, the course itself, the conditions, the environment, all of those factors? When are we trying to work on that? Well, we know nutrition and hydration should be worked on throughout training. Like from the get-go, you should be working on consumption of calories and carbs, as well as with fluids. Okay. You should be practicing to train your gut. We're realizing the gut can be trained, and that should go through the whole process, base phase all the way through to race day. Okay. You're going to be working on that. Now, I've had a number of people ask me, what should I do? I put simple guidelines in for my athletes, but if they want something more specific, if they're having some real issues, I refer them to a dietitian or a nutritionist. Kendra Miller, I'll put Kendra's information in the show notes. She has been fantastic for me. Her small tip most recently was, I just need more water. I'm just getting dehydrated, and that's causing stomach distress. Simple as that, like I'm doing the right things with nutrition, but I'm just not hydrating enough. What a simple fix. I ran on Sunday, and I'm going to get back to my point in a minute here, but I want to make sure that I emphasize this and give you all the tips that I can. my friend Nathan and I went out and we ran the shut-in trail. We added on three extra climbs. So it was about a little over 19 miles, just under 7,000 feet of climbing. And it was the best run I've had in a long time. I was running some of the climbs that I usually have to hike. So I felt the best I have in so long. And all I did was add more hydration. I stuck to the nutrition plan, consuming, as I have in the past. I've been using Scratch Chews and pretzel sticks. That's kind of my two go-tos right now, with some Tailwind hydration and water. So it's amazing. Well, that and the dietary changes. Okay, now my dietary changes, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. Talked a little bit about it in previous episodes, but making sure that I'm eating breakfast, especially something 30 minutes prior to my run, having some electrolytes prior to my run, fueling during my run, and then having something for recovery right after my run. Those are the biggest things that I'm making sure that I'm doing, and it's making a huge difference. My metabolism is starting back up. I feel hungry again in the morning, so I'm able to consume something. And it's, so things are working again. It's wonderful. I'm feeling better on my runs. I can tell when I'm not consuming enough during the day. It affects my day, my next run. So, I have to be really cognizant about making sure that I'm getting in some good calories throughout the day to make sure I fuel for the next day. So that's a huge, huge piece of it. So, so you're working on all of that. Now, basically in training, and again, we talked about this in training, you work from your least specific system to what you're racing to your most specific. Okay. So if you're racing a 5K, you're going to be doing your longer intervals, your threshold intervals early in the training, because that's more least specific to racing a 5K, whereas you're going to be doing peak VO2 closer to your goal 5K, because that's most specific, right? Conversely, if you're doing an ultra, if you do peak VO2 workouts, you would do that after your base training, because that's least specific. We're not going to use our peak VO2 system much at all in an ultra. So that's done early in the training. And then you're going to do your most specific work, which most likely for an ultra is going to be your higher volume work, right? Your aerobic running, because that's the primary system we're going to use in an ultra. Okay. So, the last block is usually, I call it maximum volume. In Lydiard, he called it integration. And that's, doing race pace, right? You're working on practicing all of the variables that you're going to face on race day. So in a marathon, you're going to be doing your long runs at pace, right? On, whatever surface you're going to be racing. So if you're racing a road marathon, you'd be running on the roads and doing some race pace work. Okay. That's integration. If we apply that principle to ultra running, then, you're going to be wanting to average your ascent and descent, right? Over the course of your run, right? So basically you take your ascent and descent, how much gain and loss is over the course of the event, how much total gain and how much total loss. You're going to add those together and divide by your race distance, right? And then that will give you your average gain and loss over the course, right? And then when you look at that, you're going to want to average that out to your normal run, right? You want that average gain loss over the course of your run. So that's the time, those last few weeks leading up to. In a 100-miler, it's usually, if you taper 2 to 3 weeks, it's usually the 6 weeks before your taper. That's your maximum volume phase. In a marathon, it's usually 4 weeks of the integration phase. Usually you have a week or 2 week taper, and then the 4 weeks before that is your integration phase, right? So it's the last piece where you're doing all of the variables that you want to work on that are specific to your race. This is where you would include heat training, okay? If you're going to do sauna work, you're going to include it in that phase, okay? Now, there's multiple ways to do it. Jason Koop has a great, a kind of calendar to work through. That's in his book. I'm not sure if it's on his website or not, but his book, which is Training Essentials for Ultra Running. Excuse me, I had to think about it there for a second. Training Essentials for Ultra Running, it has a great resource of how to do heat training. What are the priorities? He lays it out. He's like, here's the best one to do, which is dry sauna. And then he has a long-term plan. So you could do it over the course of, I believe it's 6 weeks, or he has a short-term plan, which is like the last 2 weeks leading up to the race. Now, in either case, okay, here's a few things that I want to discuss. If you are focusing too much on vertical gain, right? If you're focusing too much on heat training, if it's taking too much out of you, it's not worth it. I had Chaz on last week, and we talked about, we were doing some heat training for him because he's racing some hot races, but it was just taking too much out of him. He was not recovering from it. Me last year, training for Western States, we should have recognized it was just too much stress. It was not doing what we needed it to do. It was making me too tired. It is a huge stress on the body. Recognize that, doing a sauna session, it elevates the heart rate, to an extreme point. And it's been said that, a sauna session of 25 minutes can be the equivalent of what you did running an all-out 5K. That's how much stress it can place on the heart and the body. So recognize you have to recover from an event like that, right? You don't want to be too tired for the rest of your training. You should still be implementing other pieces here. A lot of times when we get into this integration phase, we're so focused on race pace or on volume or on vertical gain that we forget there's other aspects of training that you need to implement to make sure that the legs stay fresh. You still should be doing strides. Strides should be throughout your training. From early on in the base phase all the way through to race week. Usually I include strides every week. If there's a recovery week and I feel that we just need to do a solid recovery, maybe there's no strides in that week. And, leading up to race week, depending on who it is, I may not include strides on race week, but strides should be done throughout training. It's a neuromuscular response that keeps the legs fresh. So we want that response. We also should be throwing in some threshold work. We definitely want to touch on that system. Okay. It's what keeps us fresh. It's what keeps the body stimulated, right? Just doing aerobic work for 4 to 6 weeks, while it's good for us, we can also start to feel stale because the body gets bored. It doesn't have a stimulus. We have to create that stimulus. We have to add that stimulus. So don't forget about those other aspects of training. Keep those in that training block. All right. Keep working on that. There is a reason for that. Okay. And that's why. So continue to work on stimulating the body throughout those phases. And I can't emphasize enough. Don't do too much marathon pace work. I know it sounds like it makes sense, but if you look at where the heart rate range falls for your marathon pace work, it's a gray area. It's not doing anything for you aerobically. Okay. It's more of a mental benefit than anything. So yes, you can do it and it's okay, to do it now and again, just so you feel it, you get used to it. But again, don't over rely on it. Okay. Whereas in an ultra, we don't run our ultra pace enough, right? And that's a huge piece of this. If you're running 100 miles and you've never run at your goal pace in a training run, because usually we don't, why would you run that slow? Well, let me tell you, you need to, because you're going to use your muscles and tendons differently. And if they're not used to being used for long periods of time and that pace, they're going to fatigue out a little bit quicker because they're never used, right? In that regard, in that way, for that pace. So there should be runs where you focus on running that slow, okay? We have to let go of our ego and let go of how many miles did I cover? It doesn't matter. The body doesn't care. It cares about time on feet, right? That's huge. Another portion that I'll talk about right now, I'm going to do another sidebar here, is heart rate. Okay, not everybody trains by heart rate. I don't think it's for everybody. There's a lot of factors here with heart rate. But for those of you that are, and forgive me if you're not, just stay tuned. Hang in there. Maybe this will help one of your training partners. Now that the summer is heating up, the heat, as I talked about with the sauna, heat elevates heart rate, right? We still have to train by heart rate. The body still understands that stimulus of our heart rate, right? It's still going to receive the benefits from you sticking to your heart rate guidelines. You are still going to improve. You may not see that in the paces in the present, in this time frame, in this summer months where it's extremely hot. You have to go slower. That's just the reality. So don't worry about the pace. It is going to be slower, and that's fine. Make sure that like yesterday when I went running, the only two things that were on my watch, there were three things, and the third I just ignore. It was cadence. I just ignore that. But the two big ones are heart rate and the overall time, how long I've been running. That's the only things that are on my screen. I didn't care how fast I was going. I didn't care how far. I just looked at my heart rate and the time. And that's the two things that I focused on. So in the summer months, turn off those other things. Turn off distance, turn off pace. They don't matter, okay? You are still going to make your improvements by sticking to your heart rate guidelines. When it cools down, you will see the benefits of what you have done over the summer. When it cools down, your paces are going to get faster, and you're going to be faster. And because you stuck with it over the summer, you did what your body was needing, okay? So stick to your guns. Stick to your guns and run according to what your heart rate's telling you, as frustrating as it can be. But it'll be less frustrating if you shut off those other variables. Just have the basics on your home screen on your watch, okay? So stick with it. All right. That's enough on that. All right, back to our training. So when you're in that integration phase or maximum volume phase, and you're trying to implement all of these things, you have to be well-rounded, right? Including the workouts, including your vertical gain, if that's a piece of your course, including the surface that you're going to be running on, right? Become used to what terrain you're going to be on, if you can, right? There's some courses that you don't have that same type of thing, but make it as close as possible to, what you're going to race on. Some of us, when it gets super hot in certain climates, may have to turn to the treadmill. I totally get that. There's times where the treadmill is just easier sometimes, even if the weather's fine. Like, I get that. Like, that's a reality. So if you have to include the treadmill, not the worst thing in the world, but don't make it your primary, right? Try to get out there. Try to get out on weekends, especially on your long runs. The long run needs to be replicating as close as possible the race, right? In all of those conditions and variables, right? So if you're running a road race, your long run should be on the road. If you're running a trail race, your long run should be on trails similar to what you're going to be running. So whether that be technical terrain, whether it's, dirt roads, whatever it may be, try to make it as close as possible to what you're doing. And if you can do it more often, that's fantastic. I know it gets tough during the week, and that's the toughest part, so sometimes you have to be creative. And that's what Chaz and I talked about as well, is that, during the week, it's tougher to get to the trails. So we use the treadmill to do some incline hiking. That's a great solution. It will help you get some of that extra elevation gain. Now, you may have to shorten your weekly run a little bit, whereas typically I may prescribe an hour and a half run. I may give him an hour run and then a half hour on the treadmill. So adjust your training accordingly. So you're still getting the same volume of what your run would be, but you have to break it up so that you get in that little extra bit of climbing. Okay. So, don't feel that you have to add it on top of what already exists. So in other words, if the total run volume calls for an hour and a half run, don't do an hour and a half run and then add on a half hour of treadmill hiking, because now you have 2 hours on the feet. And again, the body understands the duration of time on feet, not the distance. Okay. So be careful with how much you're doing. Look at the signs. Okay. So a few things that can tell you, right? And this is going to into overtraining discussion, but when you look at your resting heart rate, make sure that after a big exertion, your resting heart rate returns to normal within 1 to 2 days, depending on what you did and how much effort that you put in. So, make sure you're recovering there. Watch your HRV. Learn about your HRV. How should you be reading your HRV? Is it telling you can run today? Is it telling you should take a day off? Just pay attention to it. And if you start noticing that the HRV is pretty accurate, then it's something you can follow along with. Notice your sleep patterns. How are you sleeping? Are you sleeping well, or are you getting disturbed sleep? Are you not sleeping? Is it really tough to go to sleep or to stay asleep? That can be a sign of overtraining as well. What are your eating habits like? How are you feeling when you're eating? Are you hungry? Are you not hungry? Listen to your body. Some big things there. And then look at your average paces. Now, again, during the summer, that becomes hard because of the heat. One day may be cooler and all of a sudden you're running much faster. And then another day you may be, much slower, but it's much hotter. So, take the heat into account there. So paces, like I said, it's tough to know during the summer, but if you're just feeling lethargic and tired, that's a really good sign that you need to rest and recover. So listen to your body. Okay. Did a workout last week. Had a really good workout. Paces are coming down. Very pleased to see my progression run paces are coming down. Still not where I want them to be, but it's a marked improvement. I'm very happy with the way things are going. Fitness is trending the right direction. But the next day, I was just exhausted. I had a recovery run on the schedule and, went out for a run with my wife and just felt awful. So I called it early. I just finished my run with my wife. It was nowhere near what I had on the schedule for that day, but my body just needed the recovery. So I listened to it. And then I had a great long run on Sunday because I listened to my body. And the long run was the focus, right? So understand what is the focus during the week. A recovery run is not the focus. Right? That is not the most important thing during the week. And that's why I could sacrifice that. But I can't sacrifice the long run. That's huge. I need that long run. Yesterday I had a treadmill hike. And by that I'm recording on Tuesday. So, to set this up, Sunday was the long run. Monday I had a treadmill hike, which I just skipped because I was tired from, the Sunday run. So, got to focus on recovery. I've been going through the big volume phase. I'm not quite in my taper yet, right? So the body's tired, but I can't make it overly tired, or otherwise I'm going to have to taper super hard in order to feel good on race day. I want to strike that balance even now in the maximum volume phase. I want to make sure I have that balance between just enough fatigue and not too much, right? I don't want to tip into that too much fatigue side of things. And these are some of the signs that can say, you're leading into that too much, right? So, and especially if you're having multiple days in a row where you just feel awful, slow, tired, lethargic, if multiple days are going like that, you're on the too much side and you have to back off, take a day or two off, reset. It's okay. It's better to do that than to keep going through it and keep creating too much more fatigue. And then by the time you get to the taper, like I said, you really have to taper super hard in order for your body to get back to that homeostasis and that feeling of, okay, I'm ready to race. You don't want to be there, right? You should still feel okay going into the taper, almost like you don't even need the taper, right? That's the balance. So it's a tough balance. It really is a tough place to find. We as runners tend to do too much. We tend to focus on volume and climbing and all of these other factors and really put the emphasis on making sure the training gets done, that we can check off the box that we did exactly what we were supposed to do. That's us, type A. But the reality is, we should be listening to our bodies more and focusing on making sure that we're getting recovering from the big efforts and putting the priority on those bigger efforts, those longer runs, those long workouts, right? We want to be fresh for those, right? So if you're going into the sauna and doing a lot of sauna work, but then it's affecting your workout the next day, it might not be worth it. Or you should do less sauna time, okay? So balance it. Figure out what's too much, right? And that's tough at first, especially when you introduce the sauna. You don't want your first sauna session to be the day before a big long run or a workout. That's really hard. And then also have to think about, is it worth it putting it on a recovery day? So if it's taking too much out of you, then you shouldn't put it on a recovery day. The sauna shouldn't happen on a recovery day because it's creating stress on the day that you need the recovery. Again, creating too much fatigue. So all factors to consider. Be really careful, during this time that you're not doing too much. Okay? All right, my friends. Man, so that's the conversation I want to have. I appreciate you staying with my stream of consciousness. Hopefully I got some points across that will help you in your training. That's my goal. On Monday, I head out for Colorado, July 1st, heading out to Colorado. I'm so excited to get out there, get on course, start the acclimatization, get ready for High Lonesome. High Lonesome is July 19th, so it's coming up quick. So I'm really excited for that. We got a new puppy. Her name is Saya. We got a toy miniature Australian Shepherd. So those of you that know my dog, Miles is a mini Aussie. Miles now has a sister. They're super cute. Really enjoying them. It is a lot to have a puppy in the house, but she's wonderful. Welcome addition to the family. On a break right now from high school. The high school season has ended, so that's kind of nice. I've got a few new athletes coming on board. A few will be popping off here after some of their races, their summer races. So if you're interested in coaching, don't hesitate to reach out. Know that I am going to be in Colorado through July 23rd. So I can still, communicate and such, but probably would be a good time to get started maybe in August. So if you're looking to get started in August, reach out. We can certainly have a conversation, talk about, what you're looking to do and make sure you feel comfortable with how I coach and what I do. So don't hesitate to reach out about that. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope this episode has helped you. Like I said, look to the show notes for the resources as always. And until next time, keep moving forward. Running is life, my friends.